everyone. Oh, we can do better than that. Good afternoon, everyone. All right. Thank you so much for being here for the the Homelessness, Housing, and Building Committee's public hearing. It's always cool when we get to take a public hearing on the road. It's much better to come to people than ask people to come down to City Hall because parking and everything else can be a hassle. So we are grateful to be here. Before we get started, I want to thank Corbin Commons for welcoming us all in. Would you give the folks who run this amazing location, Calvin, Sonia, Robin. I hear it's Sonia's birthday. Where's Sonia at? Sonia's the one that's hiding because it's her birthday? All right. Well, at some point, we might have to be forced to sing happy birthday to Sonia to embarrass. I really love embarrassing folks on their birthday. But partly because what we're talking about is an awesome opportunity to partner with faith-based institutions. It's only fitting, especially because this facility was part of a faith-based initiative that we start with prayer. And so I would ask Pastor Johnny Pitts to kick us off with prayer, and then I will say a few words, and I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Pitts to do a formal welcome. Pastor.
Thank you, President Hardin. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Let us be in an attitude of prayer. Gracious God, as we come before you today to discuss important matters on homelessness and affordable housing, we ask for your guidance and wisdom. You are the source of all knowledge and understanding. Therefore, we seek your direction in our decision-making process. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." Help us to listen attentively to one another with open hearts and minds. Father, may we not be quick to judge or criticize, but instead seek to understand different perspectives. We pray that you will give us the discernment to make the best decisions for the greater good. We trust that you will guide us on this path and lead us to reach a consensus that reflects your will. May our words and actions be guided by your love and grace. In the mighty name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.
Thank you so much, Pastor Fitz, for welcoming us and opening us up in prayer as appropriate. So we are here today to talk about the proposed policy of Yes in God's Backyard. In the housing world, a lot of folks know and have heard of the term NIMBY, which stands for Not in My Backyard. It's often used to describe opposition to new housing or development in certain neighborhoods. We see it, Councilmember and I, and folks from Development, Shannon and I, every Monday night at Council. Neighbors show up and they're in the general understanding that we need more housing in Columbus. But there's a asterisk, there's a but, just not in my backyard. In response, some began using YIMBY, or Yes in My Backyard, to advocate for more housing, especially affordable housing in all neighborhoods. So building on this, there's now a policy idea called YIGBY, Yes in God's Backyard. This concept empowers religious institutions to build affordable housing on their land. These policies across the country have often focused on reducing unnecessary zoning and regulatory barriers. That means letting religious institutions build affordable housing on their property without needing lengthy rezoning or special permitting processes. They also offer technical assistance, expertise, and support for navigating the development process, even matchmaking between churches and the right developers. As Columbus faces a housing crisis, faith-based institutions can play a vital role in expanding our affordable housing supply, and Yes in God's Backyard is one path towards making that possible. This policy is also part of Council's Columbus Forward package. It's a package of legislation which aims to address the effects of a growing city on long-term residents. The truth is, Columbus is at a defining crossroads. For years, we said that the challenges of superstar cities, like skyrocketing rents, longer commutes, and worsening homelessness, were still years away. But there's a new truth, that future is already here. Families are being priced out of their neighborhoods. Workers are facing impossible choices between paying rent and buying groceries. And too many of our neighbors live one paycheck from eviction. Growth is not coming, it is here. And the question we face is whether that growth will lift us all up or will it leave us behind. The good news is that Columbus has always been willing to face hard truths and act with a shared sense of purpose. We have voters willing to invest in affordable housing and transit. We have partners from libraries and churches to small developers ready to bring land, creativity, and new ideas to the table. But we must be bold. That means prioritizing housing along transit corridors, supporting tenants so they can stay in their homes while we build new units, and finding ways for everyday residents to share in what is being created by this growth. We cannot afford business as usual. We must keep people at the center of our policies and invite new partners in, like faith leaders and nonprofits, small builders, even individual parishioners, to be a part of this solution. We believe that if we do, we can ensure that as Columbus grows, it grows in a way that is equitable, that is sustainable, and that is deeply rooted in community. The task before us is clear. We have to keep searching for new and creative ways to build more housing, because the wave of growth is here, and it's up to us to channel it into a tide that lifts everyone. So I want to thank you all for being here for this important conversation. We have with us today Tony Celebrezzi from the Building and Zoning Services, Shannon Pine, who is lead, what's your title? Lead of all? Chief Zoning Official, so the best person. So any very hard question that someone has, I'm going to say, ask the other Shannon. And then I am also joined, as this is a public hearing, one of the committee members on the Housing, Homelessness, and Zoning Building Committee, my colleague, Councilmember Nancy Day-Alcar, who also is a United Methodist pastor. Councilmember, would you have any opening remarks?
Yeah. I am really excited about this initiative. I have pastored at churches that had a lot of land I didn't need, and it was challenging to navigate how we could use that land to better serve our community. But I also come at this from another lens. I am originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, a community that did not do anything about creating housing. And it was a community where commuting an hour to work was norm. It's a community where being priced out of your housing, even if you made good wages, was very common. At a time when I was earning $75,000 a year, I was unable to find housing. My lease was up. My daughter and I couch surfed for 3 months because we had no place to live. And my experience was not unusual. I was just blessed to have friends where I could stay. Not everybody has that. We need to make sure that Columbus is not the next San Francisco Bay Area where people can't afford to live there. So this is a great opportunity for us to get ahead of things and address this before things get far worse. So thank you very much, Council President, for taking this on, because it's very important work.
Thank you, Councilmember, and thank you for sharing that story. That this is exactly the thing we will say about growth. You don't have to guess what happens next. When cities grow, it's linear. More people come in. If you don't build enough housing, the housing prices go up. We all felt it last year if you own homes, and our property taxes went up nearly 40%. That was a basic next step of not building enough housing and more people coming in. What Councilmember just explained is a community, a city that let growth happen for decades without addressing it, and it pushed many people literally into homelessness. That is what we are trying to avoid here today. I am going to invite back up as one of our first presenters, Mr. Johnny Pitts, Pastor Johnny Pitts, president of Dayspring Christian Community Development Corp., that helped develop this development we're holding this hearing in today, Corbin Commons. This development is an example of what's possible when faith community partners with a developer and the city to build affordable housing. This is a great example of what we can do. I also want to recognize, I see former council member Patsy Thomas is here. So great to see you and welcome. There is still more seats. Just like church, you can. There are still pews right at the front row. If I don't like this.
Thank you. Thank you, Council President Hardin, and good afternoon to everyone again, and I'd like to welcome you all to Corbin Commons as one of the owner partners and developers of this particular project over 25 years ago. This community is full of experience and interest in creating more housing units in Columbus, as evidenced in this room. It's an untapped opportunity for the city. I am grateful to Council President Hardin that he recognizes this, and we look forward to working with him on this policy. Those with long-time experience in this space, like Dayspring and its partners, are more than willing to provide partnership, mentorship, or capacity building for anyone interested in joining the effort. We need everyone interested in developing affordable housing to grab a shovel and just meet the growing need. Having 25 plus years in this space, the city could be supporting new small and minority developers, particularly faith-based organizations interested in contributing to the affordable housing supply. If prioritizing new small and emerging developers for affordable housing is a priority, it needs to be reflected in the details of the programming and city outreach about available funding. A broad review of who is currently or historically accessing city funding for housing would reflect just how successful the city has been in getting funds to truly affordable units, or the type of developers the programs are intending on serving. If resources are abundant, then an open gate policy to public funding for housing makes sense. But if thresholds need to be set, they should be intentionally set to meet the stated goals. Almost all, perhaps all, of the current available affordable housing funding programs through the Department of Development are tied to OFA. OFA famously has barriers for entry that prevents urban, minority, and new developers from accessing state tax credits. It also deprioritizes urban projects and projects in minority concentrated neighborhoods, further preventing Columbus neighborhoods from accessing OFA funding to scale. By tying all the city's programs to a flawed state program, the city is unintentionally reinforcing the systematic barriers to access for new, minority, small, and emerging developers in affordable housing space. By tying all the city's programs to OFA funding, it also restricts funding to projects that already have funding, of which there are already too few in Columbus, instead of opening access to new additional housing. The city does not currently have preservation funding to support affordable housing owners to preserve affordability after LIHTC credits expire. This requires developers to either sell, raise rents, or operate properties at subpar conditions. A result of this omission in policy is that the city is losing more affordable housing units every year than it is creating, and the quality of the aging affordable housing is inevitably declining. At last review, the only program available that included preservation in the program title required the applicant to be constructing new build to be eligible to apply, effectively negating the preservation part of the stated program. Corbin Commons is owned by a 25-year-old partnership unlike any in the country. The Agler Elder Limited Partnership, which owns Corbin Commons, is comprised, get this, of 3 faith-based CDCs and a quasi-governmental agency. Dayspring Christian Community Development Corporation from Rhema Christian Center, New Salem Community of Caring and Development Foundation from New Salem Baptist Church, My Brother's Keeper from Mount Hermon Missionary Baptist Church, and the quasi-governmental agency in Columbus Housing Partnership doing business at Homeport. So we know this space and have been in this space for many years. We stand ready to partner with you, Council President Hardin, in this endeavor, and showing how to create and develop needed capacity for faith-based CDCs in this important space. We thank you so much for recognizing this deficiency and initiating a policy to address the concerns that surround it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pastor. Let me stay just in case there are any questions. I was going to ask a question about tell me what's not working, and I think you told us already, and what we can do better, so I appreciate that. And even thinking about this project, and remind me, correct us, so the city was a partner in terms of a loan at some point, and this is what I'm getting at is it took years and work, and I see folks who had to come and beg and jump over hoops for the city to finally say, well, we'll forgive that loan down the road, but that was 20 years down the road. As we think about the preservation plank of the development department's stated goals on how do we keep affordability, what other things can we do to get ahead of? Because at the end of the day, we want to preserve properties like this. And when we say preserve, you mean just like everything at your own home, after 25 or 30 years, it needs some upkeep. Mm-hmm. And it needs upkeep. And I think this is what Pastor Chris is getting at too, is if you do not find money to invest in a 20-year-old project, it will deteriorate. And if we don't, if someone doesn't come in and invest dollars, maybe at this point in our market, what could happen is a big developer with money can come in and invest in, but guess what? He's not going to keep it affordable after he puts his couple $1 million in. He's going to jack the rents up from whatever to whatever. So what other thing, as you think about making it easier, because I think this preservation point is one that really is a side to directly what we're talking about, but it could be critically important opportunity for us, especially as Mayor Ginther has put before voters a bond package this November, of which there's $500 million that would go towards affordable housing. Remember, a bond is not a tax increase. It just says that we can borrow at a lower rate of interest. So it allows the city to put that money out there cheaper. Some of that money has to go to preservation. Just wanted to see if there's any more you want to hit on there.
Well, I think that in your policy, as I stated, the city needs to include in its policy something with regard to supporting the preservation of existing affordable housing at the end of the LIHTC period, which is very crucial and which we faced. I would also say that we would like to prevent other CDCs from having to jump through the hoops and to come down and beg and everything that we had to do in order to get that forgiveness of that loan after 20 years of preserving Corbin Commons and wanting to keep it and to proceed and to preserve it. And so those are policies that I think would make it easier. If it would be easier for, if you're not a WOTA, if you're not a Homeport, if you're not worth $23 million, then it's hard to penetrate the affordable housing trust. it's hard to penetrate the Ohio Housing Finance Agency. It's almost impossible for us. So we have to create ways to make it easier for us to get the funding that we need to do the developing.
Okay.
And that's what would help us the most.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
For Pastor Phipps? Anything? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, I want to welcome up our friend Sheldon Johnson, who leads a partnership with The Ohio State University, with Us the City, and the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority that invest in the Near East Side. Sheldon has worked in housing at Community Development for All People and in community banking at Fifth Third Bank. He also has a divinity degree from Duke, and I want to shout out Sandra Lopez, who is here from Fifth Third, who is also part of, I think, a project that Sheldon is going to talk about. Welcome, Sheldon.
Good afternoon, everyone. As the Council President said, my name is Sheldon Johnson, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of Partners Achieving Community Transformation on the Near East Side. And I'm here really to testify in support of the IGBY initiative. We all know how much housing is needed. You've heard a bit about the affordable housing need in our neighborhoods, and we know that we need housing at all levels in the city. As we're having unprecedented growth, there's unprecedented need for housing, so we need to have some unprecedented innovation to be able to get there. I'm excited to talk about a partnership that my friend Sandra and our friends at Fifth Third Bank were able to fund that we could bring to the Near East Side, where we're working with enterprise community partners to do what's called the Faith-Based Development Initiative, where we're training 4 congregations, 4 churches on the development process, and also giving them some dollars and technical assistance to be able to develop their underutilized land. And I think policies like these are really important. We were able to have an example of a partnership with a technical assistance organization and a thoughtful private sector partner like Fifth Third to bring dollars. But Council President, you and I have talked offline about this a bit. Even when those large amounts of dollars are not available, anything that we can do to make it easier, cheaper, faster, and more efficient to build housing is something that I think we should all be in support of. There's an opportunity in our neighborhoods where there are faith-based institutions, there are congregations that own land, that have underutilized land, are interested in doing partnerships like we're seeing here at Corbin Commons and Providence Glen. And, if Johnny was up here, you could talk about some of the other great work Dayspring does. But they don't have necessarily the confidence, they don't have the connections, they don't have the access to capital to be able to do those things, right? And that's leaving land underutilized that could be supporting organizations in our community. It could be having opportunities for people to live. And I think conversations like this are leading to us filling that gap. We have a challenge. This is an opportunity. I think faith-based institutions are a great partner to be able to bring the civic sector together, the nonprofit and the public sector together. And we know that this is something that other communities have recognized. We see in Portland and in Atlanta and San Diego, there are examples of policies that are making it easier to build, that are calling out faith-based organizations and congregations as important partners. And I think here in Columbus, that's something that we could really learn from. I think that one of the things we've seen with the program we're doing on the Near East Side, it's a small group of churches with only 4, but they are 4 of the largest landowners in our neighborhood. I think we're going to be able to have an outsized impact on the neighborhood. And the other thing about that, the opportunity is we know that there's interest. You came to the neighborhood about a month ago, and we were standing room only with church leaders from around the city who were expressing, we're ready. If the city will come and provide support, we're ready. We own land. We want to find partners. I see my, former colleague, Reverend John Egger in the audience. We know that there are church leaders here who have done this work. We have examples in this community. And I think really now is the time for us to make those connections with support from the city to be able to bring those new units online. So thank you for inviting me, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Sheldon. Would you unpack a little bit more about the technical assistance component of this? One of the things that I am, as a person of faith, I go to Mount Olivet Baptist Church downtown, and to your point, deacon boards might not necessarily have the expertise
Right.
to do whole school development. And so part of this is not just about building more housing, it's also about protecting the church as well. So could you talk about like the importance of the faith-based component? And then I'm wondering, and this is certainly right now outside of what we are talking about, what is also making what you are doing, the partnership between you and Fifth Third special, is you are actually bringing dollars to the table. What are those dollars being used for? And right now we are not having that conversation, but down the road, how does that move this forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what you see in a lot of urban areas, especially in historically black and brown neighborhoods, as the things have gotten more expensive and as the congregations have gotten older, you start seeing these historic churches that have a lot of people who come in from outside the neighborhood, come in. And that can be looked at as a bad thing. And, there are challenges with that. But what I think it also shows is this connection to this institution that has been a backbone in our neighborhood, through generations. You might not live there any longer, and you can speak, how long your family has been, in churches in the community. So I think that connection is really important to bring, that congregations and faith-based group bring a level of connection to this type of work, which is really important. What they often don't bring is an understanding in, architecture and tax credits and, how to navigate OFA and how to navigate financial institutions. And there are people around the city who do that work every day, right? And some of that matchmaking that you talked about. So the technical assistance that we're bringing, the program is begins with the first phase. It's a 20-hour curriculum where the church leaders are learning about the development process. So some of that is just nitty gritty. This is what it means to develop a pro forma. This is what a land lease is. This is how you fund affordable housing. The idea isn't that we're trying to turn these church leaders into developers, but we want them to be cognizant of the issues enough so that they can be in conversation about what it means to find a good partner. But the other part of that technical assistance is just having somebody to walk alongside them who speak their language, who respect their expertise, even though it's different, and who can let them know that they have the ability to do this. Every class that we had, we started and ended every session with me saying, you guys can do this, right? I know it seems big, it seems confusing, but you can do it. I think that's an important part of the technical assistance as well. In terms of the dollars, I can't, again, just shout out Fifth Third enough. And I really believe that when we bring the faith sector, we bring the nonprofit sector and the public sector together, we have private sector partners who can bring some dollars to the table. What we're using those dollars for is for pre-development. So many of these churches have owned land for a long time. So, they might need to see if there's some type of environmental remediation they need to do. They need to make sure that the title is cleared. They need to get paid for some architects or a consultant to help them do the work that you do before you actually start the building process. So the majority of those funds are going for pre-development grants, and we're also hiring an owner's rep for each congregation to help hold their hand throughout the process. I'm happy to support the congregations, but we've got land we're trying to develop too. So being able to pay someone else who can really just focus on them for several hours a week is what we're investing those dollars in.
I just wonder, as we use this pilot, hopefully, as an example, if these are the kind of partnerships with local banks and local communities that we could maybe come together with to help with, and there are. I wonder. Maybe you can talk about this. Are there other things the city can do that's not giving money per se, but that would remove costs? And I'm thinking like tapping fees and things with underground utilities. Could you talk about those?
You just hit on it. You just hit on it, right?
Yes, tapping fees.
And we've had conversations around upzoning as well. What are things that we can do just logistically and the process? We love our friends at Building and Zoning Services, but depending on the land, you're trying to bring certain things. There's fees, there's applications, there's time. How can we streamline that process? And we've seen this done before in our city, right? When Mayor Coleman identified East Franklinton as an area that we wanted to see. It was easier to build in East Franklinton, than it was in other areas of the city. So there are things that the city can do that I think that are low cost that would have a big impact for organizations like Dayspring or organizations like mine trying to do this work.
I was say tap-in fees was why we didn't develop the land at St. Mark's.
Wow.
We couldn't afford the tap-in fees.
Hey, explain tapping, please, or what tapping is.
Yeah, so tapping into the the underground utilities is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, so whether it's the electric, whether it's the pipe, like if you think of your street, when the alley behind it or on the street, there's the utilities that go to the larger system that has to get tapped into the land or the building that you're on. There's a fee to doing that, which for a large multifamily building or trying to do houses at scale can be cost prohibitive.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I too am not a developer, so but what we do know, because we do hear about this a lot, is that you really have to guess what's underground before you go in there, and you don't know if the utilities are there. You don't know if the utilities are old and need to literally be replaced. You don't know. Sometimes folks don't know how far the tapping is, like where the actual pipes meet. And these are hidden costs sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so again, and we will talk about the actual legislation that council intends to bring before, intend to bring before council by the end of the year. But we are also cognizant of these other pieces that could make this open up more opportunity for development.
That's great.
Anyone, Sonny, any questions or comments?
Not at this point.
All right. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next up, I'm going to welcome up Joe Ritchie, who is CEO at Praxia Partners and has worked on numerous projects with faith-based partners, including the one here at Corbin Commons. Joe, welcome to the hearing.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here. Let me adjust this. It's a special pleasure because I've had the opportunity to work with both Sheldon and Johnny Pitts on projects, and I see the supercharged energy that's required to get to the finish line on projects, and they have that, and I think that kind of energy is in this room as well. My experience, I'm among the oldest people in the room, I think. I've been doing this for almost 50 years, working with faith-based organizations and nonprofits in community development, primarily housing, and a special emphasis on special needs housing, which is the most underrepresented group of affordable housing scenario. I see lots of opportunity, especially for the church groups. Sheldon mentioned it, and I think it's worth emphasizing. The technical skills of construction, development, and finance are not necessarily with the faith-based organizations. But the faith-based organizations have two significant assets that are unassailable. The first is they have a history of stewardship that is better than almost any other organization because they start with few resources and hold those resources tightly as they move through generations. There's hardly any for-profit corporation that can stand up to that, and literally no public corporation that could stand up to that stewardship model. That's really important because it's an asset. The second thing is very intangible. It's the connection in the community that Sheldon referred to. That is absolutely a risk mitigator, whether it's the lender, the investor, the grant funder. The fact that you're tightly connected in the community, and Dayspring and Mount Hermon and New Salem are really good examples of this. There was no question that this facility would fill up as it did immediately upon completion, nor was there any question that it would be 100% occupied for 25 consecutive years. That's worth something to an investor. So in some ways, you have to be your own cheerleader. When you're connected to the community, you can guarantee success that no for-profit developer can guarantee as they come into a new community. So part of this is just assessing your own assets and bringing those forward in discussion. Another differentiator for faith-based organizations and for-profit organizations, that's a difference, is for-profit organizations rarely will share any information at all. Everything is proprietary. Everything is subject to a non-disclosure agreement. Even their agreements with you oftentimes prevent you from talking to other faith-based organizations about your own transaction because they're legally bound to secrecy. As opposed to nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations that can and do oftentimes freely share their information on an ongoing basis with their peers, making it possible for the collective to have more and better information than the private sector has. Now, how does that play out in a public-private partnership? You announce the fact that you have this sharing relationship and that you have parity, at least parity, with the for-profit sector. So I encourage all of you to think of ways in which your assets, whether it's land, whether it's the social connection, whether it's your own history of stewardship, can be brought to the table to improve your opportunities. I'll leave you with one important example, and I think it plays to what Sheldon is talking about, where you have several church organizations in a particular neighborhood or community that all have a small amount or some amount of excess land that could be developed. None of those individual projects necessarily fit into a low-income housing tax credit submission, but all of them might. It's entirely possible, and we've done this, to group many small projects together into one large scattered site tax-exempt bond with support that under a standardized model of stewardship that all churches understand, probably better than the for-profit sector, and put that together and advance that as a group in a way that is economically efficient, utilizes surplus resources that are already invested in by the city, and deliver it permanently to affordability or preservation of affordable housing, because the church stewards have that in their mission. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have now or afterwards. Johnny mentioned the transparency. That's really important. These partners, the 4 partners that worked hard on this project and the adjoining project, and many others, have a share file, all their documents, all their due diligence, all their audits, all their reviews, everything online, everything transparent to every member of their CDC board, to every parishioner or congregant, to their leadership, and to the city and other funders. And I think that a level of transparency is absolutely essential for all of you to preserve that stewardship model that you've done such a good job of developing over the years, but also to advance the collective knowledge that's necessary for success. Thank you.
Joe, you are another example of that technical support being brought to the CDCs and to the faith community. How did I guess it's unique because the 4 CDCs came together to do this versus just working with one church or one CDC. How does, I guess you might have answered it that last piece, but how do you build that kind of trust then to go out and do a project like this, like Corbin Commons?
I'm glad you asked that question, because the trust also emanates from the faith-based organizations. That's where the trust exists. The fact that there are 4 nonprofits together, 3 of them faith-based, established sort of a ground of trust that made it possible to have open discussions about, including vulnerable discussions about protecting the church assets, the preservation of the church. In fact, each of these were set up as they're special purpose entities. That is, the church is not invested in the property. A special purpose entity is, so there's a level of insurance that protects the parent from the specific activity. There's working through the operational aspects of it, so sometimes difficult discussions, but active discussions about how do you preserve things, how do you make things work in the event of a change of circumstance. So those are honest, organic conversations among trusted parties. I will say that the operating agreement that was negotiated is available to all of you. If you want a template of how church groups work together for 25 years without a fuss, they have a really good example. Cut and paste, work from there. But that trust level, it starts from those church groups. I think it's really important. And that transparency that makes it possible to continue that discussion.
You mentioned a scattered site option. I think that would be very exciting for a lot of churches who have a good amount of land, but not, enough for a large complex. Can you share an example of that particular approach?
Well, yes, in Columbus, Homes on the Hilltop, there's 60 units scattered site. That was a 9% tax credit project. It's now 35 years old, but that's an example of that property came out of bankruptcy. The nonprofits grabbed it out of bankruptcy. All those sites scattered were able to be redeveloped in one setting with one piece of financing. I think Fifth Third was involved in that financing. So that's an example. The 4% tax credit program has a tax-exempt bond, so that's the indenture. The total financing comes from that. You have one investor, a corporate investor or a syndicated investor that comes in. They deliver about half of the money that's needed for the project, utilizing the tax credits. The other half is a combination of debt and soft funding. But the ability to do a large-scale investment successfully would include standardizing the architecture and engineering so that you're not reinvesting in all the time. You get significant economies from scale from building the same product over and over. So having a range of products that's available, that's a kit, if you will, that might go through a special desk in the building department for approval. They say, oh, this is the same plan the church built down the street, cited to this site. We know what's required. Here's the write-up. You proceed quickly through that process. Even a zoning change that is like others, that you create a kind of a standard template, would speed the process and eliminate a lot of risk. So those are just practical examples of how a group of folks willing to talk and keeping an open book can proceed together efficiently.
We know Steve Torcell.
Yes,
So there's
for
a
sure.
phone call to be made.
For sure. That's a great example. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Next up, I want to welcome up my friend, Anatea Kasango, who is a Director of Community Partnerships for the Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio. Welcome, Anna.
Well, good afternoon, Council President Hardin, City Council, and esteemed Columbus staff. Thank you all for having us today for an important conversation on Yes in God's Backyard. I am Anatea Kasongo, Director of Community Partnerships at the Affordable Housing Alliance, and as a woman of faith, I am very excited about the potential of this legislation. Our team strongly believes that removing outdated zoning barriers and reducing red tape elevates trusted community-centered organizations like faith-based nonprofit and education institutions and ensures that our housing problem is solved from the ground up under the stewardship of neighborhood leaders. At the Alliance, we believe that zoning laws should be living, breathing documents that reflect the needs of current residents, which is why we did a temperature check on what Central Ohioans think about policies that address our housing and land use needs. And what we found was an overwhelming support for zoning policies that address our housing shortage and reduce costs. When asked if residents support creating a simplified process for nonprofits, churches, and colleges to build affordable housing on land that they own, that support rose to 86%. Unfortunately, we know that this overwhelming support comes from a place of growing housing insecurity. That same survey found that 3/4 of our neighbors love or care for someone that has been impacted by our housing shortage. If we do not take immediate steps to address our affordable housing needs, another 20,000 families will slip into extreme housing insecurity by 2040. As a woman of faith, I personally believe that we have a divine mandate to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And apart from laying down our lives for others, what greater display of love is there than to make sure that our neighbor has a roof over their head and a place to call home? This is a sentiment I hear repeatedly in our conversations with faith groups and nonprofits alike. They strongly desire to be a part of our housing solution and share their resources. A recent analysis found that faith groups alone own over 1,300 acres of land in our city. We are thankful for the many groups who want to use their assets to build or preserve affordability. While our current zoning code restricts, adds expenses, and uncertainty to the process, peer cities like Atlanta, San Antonio, and Seattle have already passed YIGBY laws that empower nonprofits to use their lands for housing needs. Other cities and states, including Ohio with the recently introduced Promised Land Act, and are debating similar legislation now, and this movement continues to grow as housing pressures reach more doorsteps, pews, and places of worship. For Columbus's YIGBY legislation, AHACO respectfully asks Council to consider the following circumstances in drafting its policy, many of which have already been discussed by the previous presenters. First, most affordable housing requires external funding to keep prices low, like the low-income housing tax credits. Local zoning flexibility should be designed to complement these state funding streams and ensure that buildings can be large enough or compact enough to pencil out. While not precise, we often find that these funding streams require buildings to be at least 40 dwelling units per acre to qualify for this funding. Preserving affordability is just as important as new construction. With many nonprofits and church groups already owning affordable housing that is at risk of market conversion, we hope that any YIGBY policy can accommodate the preservation and rehabilitation strategies that may add more units to the land's footprint. Lastly, and we've talked about this extensively, to successfully and sustainably support our faith-based and nonprofit institutions, they need comprehensive technical assistance, which includes independent legal counsel, access to pre-development funding, and viable financial products such as low interest rate loans or credit enhancements. These tools ensure that smaller and local groups have the resources to keep up with out-of-state actors. While these financial elements may not be appropriate for YIGBY legislation, we hope this comprehensive support can be considered in a broader housing strategy. Council, thank you for championing Yes in God's Backyard, and AHACO looks forward to our continued partnership to advance housing affordability in Columbus.
Thank you so much, Anna, and want to also shout out our good friend Carly Booth. To you two have become literally the leaders in pushing these conversations that we really do believe will fruitfully bring more housing to our market. Are there any questions for Anna?
No, I don't have any.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know you did so well. I was going to ask one of my team members to come up and answer a question around capacity that I think you just got her off the hook. What the point that I was going to make, you acknowledged this, that in Columbus or in our region, we think that there's about 1,300 acres of developable land owned by the faith community. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of opportunity. And I'm excited to hear from one of our Reverend Edgar, who's going to give testimony, because some land can be scattered, as we talked about, but some land can literally be on the church property. And we all know that the pandemic changed how some of us attend church. Some of us go to church virtually now, which means some of those big parking lots that the church used to need could literally be used to keep people housed. And so we think that that's a big opportunity. I wanted to just acknowledge the capacity, because I don't think that this is just a long, big, hard conversation to create a couple of units. I think that there really might be opportunity to bring significant amount of units onto the market. And still, we see this as just one piece. So I want to thank all those who we invited to speak for sharing their experience. Sheldon mentioned this, but last month we met with over 40 faith and housing leaders at Shiloh Baptist Church, leaders who let me know that they are hungry to work on developing housing for their community on their land. I heard a call to expand their ministry, and that is that this is about helping congregations live out their values in new ways by creating affordable apartments on a vacant lot, by turning underused space into affordable housing, and by activating land that today sits idle into homes for families. As been said, we've seen cities like Charlotte, Atlanta, San Diego, and Portland move in this direction. And the early results are promising. More affordable units are coming to fruition, more community engagement, and more hope for people who need a safe place to live. Yes in God's Backyard is bigger than a policy change. It's an invitation to a broader base of problem solvers. It says solving the housing crises isn't just the job of developers or government. It's something that every sector, including our faith community, can help lead. Our city is at its best when everyone has a role in building its future. So I'm grateful to be working with the city's building and zoning services. And over the past few months, we've worked to craft the policies around Yes in God's Backyard. So today we're going to talk about BZS is committed to working with us to bring forward legislation in the next month or so to implement, by the end of the year, to implement expedited zoning variance tracking, which could allow applications to be processed within 45 days of complete submission, depending on the council schedule. This would allow applications to go to council directly after staff approval. This would include expedited project management and a dedicated project manager to be staff point on contracts that shepherd YIGB projects through the process. This would apply to eligible parcels that are parcels containing a religious institution or contiguous or adjoining parcel under the same ownership for accessory purposes. So I want to emphasize that this legislative proposal would provide expedited zoning for housing on faith-based land, which would bring applications from staff approval directly to council review. Secondly, it would provide dedicated project manager to shepherd YIGB projects. Additionally, next year, we're looking at models to help provide technical assistance to faith-based institutions that own land and are interested in building affordable housing. There are models across the country, including in Cleveland, in Charlotte, and in Detroit, providing this type of technical assistance. We want to now move. Director, do you want to say anything about these ideas so far and just how we are coming up with what is possible and what is not?
Sure.
And the potential, because there could be folks who say, well, why don't we just upzone or allow to upzone all faith-owned land? We actually have a good response to that, and the answer is we're getting to it. So,
So, thank you, Council President Hardin. There is so many different facets to this entire project, this process that we need to go through as a city to allow people to build and make sure that they're building in a safe way so that facilities that everybody ends up living in is safe and sound facility. As the Councilmember Hardin was alluding to, we are with tremendous support from council. We're doing the zone in project, which right now we're looking at 40% of the city to rezone early next year. And that whole goal is, how do we make it easier for people to develop on their parcels? How do we allow that to occur? And that is all part of a zoning package. And obviously this is a great opportunity, and we're excited about the amount of land through this particular initiative that could bring housing online for folks that desperately need it. Internally, if the Council President will allow me a moment, I always like folks to remember that there's a number of different processes that are going on at the same time. You've got the zoning that Shannon here is in charge of, and that's figuring out the use and how does it get developed with where it's set and how does the zoning allow it. But there's also a whole group of folks that from 14 different agencies that look at the site plan. How does traffic come in? Where are you going to have the parking? Where's stormwater going to be dealt with? How is that dealt with? So those and different setbacks. So that's another group that is working, and we're working hard with those other agencies within the city to set up hard timelines where reviews have to be done in a certain amount of days. And then there's another process that looks at how do you actually construct the building? How do you put the 2x4s together in a safe fashion so that everybody can live there? And that's another process, and that process actually has an expedited review that for many projects we can get those done after hours in about a week. So the site plan is still the big challenge of trying to figure out with stormwater and how you hook it into the utilities. But there's many different components to this going on with council's leadership that we've been trying to continue to allow. You mentioned the pandemic. We now have close to 85% of all building plans and applications coming in electronically now. No more having to come down and visit our cool office downtown. You can just hit the enter button and it's to us, and then all of our reviews are done electronically, and we also use Zoom calls and WebEx calls. So this is a tremendous step forward, and this is exciting to be able to look at this and help move this forward. So.
Thank you so much. And we at council, the administration, everybody's going to be talking about housing a lot. I'm not the only council member who's pushing a zoning-related housing component. My colleague, Councilmember Otto Beatty, has legislation that he too will present to council before the end of the year, supporting accessory dwelling units. So those are the units that if you own a house and you want to build a space for your mother or mother-in-law in the backyard, you can do so. To have folks age in place and help folks help with the housing crisis as well. So just thank you for the partnership, and we look forward to working closely together on this and other housing related issues. Now we have public testimony. We have 5 folks signed up to speak today. The first person to come before us is someone who is really a leader in this space, and hopefully he's going to talk about an exciting project that he's right now is working on that is so connected to Yes in God's Backyard. Pastor John Edgar. Hey. Oh, sure. Hey. Do you mind? Well, I don't mind. That's fine. Yeah. Thank you. That was my fault. Sure.
As was indicated, my name is Reverend John Edgar, and I am delighted to be here this afternoon to express my strong support for the Yes in God's Backyard initiative that Council President Hardin is bringing forward, as he has indicated. I submitted written testimony, but I'd like to use my 3 minutes to just follow up on some of this conversation that we've been having. Over the last 35 years, I've been involved in faith-based initiatives on developing housing, going back to when I helped to bring Habitat for Humanity to Columbus. For 20 years, I was the founding pastor of the United Methodist Church for All People and our CDC that over that period of time developed $150 million of affordable housing on the South Side. There's tremendous potential for what can be done in these creative partnerships with faith-based groups, private developers, the city, and other groups. As I listened, I would mention a couple of things. One, as Council President Hardin indicated, in retirement, one of the churches I'm working with right now is Bethel International United Methodist Church. It's up on Bethel Road. It has 7 acres. And it is a church that already is redefining its mission to be a community center for new Americans. It has a great facility, and it has a lot of excess parking. So we are working right now to take 2.5 acres of that surplus parking and turn it into a development to meet the aspirations of the people in that area. What we want to do is build 39 4-bedroom apartments for larger families. And it's a great project. We're in communication with both of the council members here, and it's one illustration of what can happen. What I want to emphasize is that there's an old adage in real estate development that says there's no development without site control. In other words, the land is what it all comes down to. It's the core fundamental of it. And churches have land, as been indicated. What will happen out of the Yes in God's Backyard initiative is it'll be so much easier for churches to put that land into play. And that's wonderful. What I want to stress, however, in the spirit of what's already been said, that's only half of what is essential. It's the technical assistance. And Sheldon did a great job of talking about how that's being lived out right now with PAC. And he alluded to the fact that they're working with Enterprise Community Partners, a national group that is a national faith-based initiative. And there's a lot that we could be learning from that model. There's so much that can be learned just by sharing, has been indicated by Daysprings and other folks across the years. The $150 million of housing I've been involved in was always done in partnerships. And we learned as we went. Some of those were healthier partnerships than others. And so what I would bring forward, somewhat based on what Sheldon has said and what I think the council president is intimating, is that we need to figure out how to come alongside faith-based groups that want to do this for the first time and not have to recreate the wheel. There are a couple of really clear places that I would mention. One is every church should have excellent legal representation from somebody that understands not only real estate, but affordable housing development. And there are people that specialize in this. And having that person on the side of the church creates an equal footing. And then alongside of that is the fact that all too often, other for-profit developers will come in and they'll see the land a church has and they'll want to use it, but then they're going to want to take over. And to avoid that being an unequal arrangement, it's partly legal counsel, but I think it's also helping churches to do enough pre-development so they can begin to crystallize their vision of what they want to do. And that does take some money. And so I would posit as a possibility putting together a loan fund that could be made available to churches to do pre-development, probably tied to them going through a program such as Sheldon's running right now to show that they're serious. And there are some examples of this. The Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing, for example, made $300,000 available to the group I was leading that was only going to be paid back if the project went forward. And if the project didn't go forward, it turned into a grant. Now, I don't think you'd want to do that over and over again, but if folks did training, came up with a good idea, were able to draw down those dollars for pre-development, pay them back if the project goes forward, it could be, I think, a great asset. So it's a long way around saying, I think you're doing a great job. What's happening at Bethel International Church, I think, is a poster child of what you have been proposing. And I look forward to seeing this create a wave of new opportunity throughout the city of Columbus. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edgar. Not Mr. Edgar, Pastor Edgar, Reverend Edgar. I apologize. Put some respect on that name. No, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I think that what we're hearing, the technical assistance is critically important. I am excited, one, about potential opportunities with local funders, like maybe banks, but also, guys, I can't stress enough, if we pass the bond package with $500 million capacity, it really does open up doors for new partnerships. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to stress that again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Reverend Nager. Next, we have Pastor Josh Lawrence of World Fire Church. Welcome to the hearing.
For brevity, I will stick to my script. Those pastors in the room know what happens sometimes if you go off of script a little bit. Council President Hardin, members of the council, thank you so much for allowing me to testify today. My name is Josh Lawrence. I lead World Fire Church here in Columbus. I strongly support the Yes in God's Backyard initiative because it gives faith communities the ability to use their property in ways that directly meet the city's most pressing need, which is safe, affordable housing. Currently, we have a partnership on a project called Hamilton Rising at the former Fort Rapids site. And I believe this is a picture of what's possible and what could be possible in the future. This site has been closed since 2016, and together with Drever Partners, we are currently working to transform it into a community with up to 325 new homes, designed to be safe, stable, and affordable for working families in East Columbus. This project is more than housing alone. What makes it unique is the presence of a faith-based community alongside the residents to give support. Communities like this will not only provide homes, it will also include a faith and community element where families can access a number of services to support a holistic and healthy family. The church in the middle of a community helps create a holistic environment where body, mind, and spirit are cared for, where families don't just survive, but they thrive. This is exactly what YIGB makes possible. By adjusting zoning, you open the door for churches all across Columbus to repurpose underused land, parking lots, buildings into housing and supporting services. It empowers faith communities to be a part of the solution, working hand in hand with the city to meet real needs in innovative ways. YIGB doesn't just make projects like ours possible, but it will inspire many other creative solutions from the church and faith organizations all across the city. It gives us a way to make a meaningful impact while aligning with your vision, President Hardin, to make Columbus a city for all people. So I personally urge the adopting of this zoning change. In doing so, you, this council, this president will leave a legacy of collaboration with faith community, one where churches step up as partners, helping Columbus grow into a city of hope, opportunity, and belonging. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pastor. For some reason, this jogged a shout out also. My friend, Senator Michelle Reynolds, at the state level, is also interested in moving forward Yes in God's Backyard initiative on the state level. Her initiative is called the Promised Land. That's good, isn't it? I'm like, darn, I wish I would have thought of that. The Promised Land. And her initiative would, and it could potentially layer on top of what we do on the local level. Her initiative would provide a 10% tax credit for faith-owned land to build affordable homes on that land. And so we are certainly watching that piece of legislation that she is pushing through the Ohio legislature. She was able to secure more than $100 million for housing in this last year budget. So we are hopeful that she's able to continue to move this forward. So I just think that there are more opportunities, and I think many folks, and bipartisan, because Senator Reynolds is a Republican, to come across the aisle to support building homes for families. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Alex Fowler from the EDAP Grab in Elevate Northland. Alex, welcome to back to council. I guess this is not council, but kinda.
It's kind of nicer in some ways. Good afternoon, Council President Hardin, members of council, staff, fellow residents. My name is Alice Fowler. As a graduate of the Emerging Developer Program and ULI's READY program, I am one of the homegrown developers hoping to do a share of the work as we build more needed houses and apartments for the residents of our city. In particular, I've been focusing my company on partnerships with churches and houses of worship. In navigating negotiations, zoning, and site plans for 4 different potential projects, here are some obstacles I've encountered and possibilities for minimizing them for myself and others. Our churches, nonprofits, and houses of worship are operated by committee. Many people must be brought on board, educated, and persuaded that the many layers of legal, financial, and compliance work and the risk are worth it for what is actually a negligible monthly profit for the first decade or 2. Often, developers make their money by increasing the value of the land and selling it. Most of our church partners want to remain owners of their land, or at least partners. They don't want out. Their time horizon is very long. So one challenge is getting the project off the starting blocks. There are endless aspects to consider and reconsider, and the church partner almost always owns the land outright, isn't paying any property taxes, and ultimately can wait forever to begin. So one helpful strategy would be some kind of timed incentive, perhaps free permits or tapping fees if the project breaks ground within X months of preliminary site plan submission or something to kind of speed things up. Another opportunity is to make these projects more attractive for the church by making a better deal on the operations side. So the most exciting way I can see to do that is to have the city invest in energy savings. Whether that's a geothermal system for a duplex, rooftop solar on an apartment building, working with Impact Community Action on insulation and efficient appliances, and or incentivizing the developer to preserve the mature trees that shade the parcel. all of these sustainability investments decrease operating costs? Could the city invest its own money in the energy aspect to make these projects more enticing for the churches? I found my own potential partners want to minimize construction costs. And although they care about stewarding God's creation, they aren't that interested in spending more on construction to save on energy later. We could help activate the value of active and passive solar enhancements through incentives. And that would then, because the church will be part of the operations, make the actual development more profitable and help the sustainability of the church community in the long term. The third and final item I'll mention today is land use. I'm working with a church on 161 where the building, a repurposed restaurant, is at the front of a lot with a large expanse of unused parking and grass behind it. Perfect for following the city master plan and tucking in housing on a link-us corridor. However, with the new design standards that are part of Zone In, which I love them, by the way, but it would have the church building needing to comply with facade design standards for transparency and closeness to the street, which would require rebuilding the church building, and that is not in the cards. Instead of requiring a variance, perhaps making the process to subdivide the parcel quick and free of charge for church development projects would overcome this hurdle, since they really need to separate anyway because the development property would end up not being able to be tax exempt. They have to separate them somehow anyway. Making that easier would help that whole process. And if we could be thoughtful about the fact that it's really one, there doesn't need to be a setback then between the church and the parking for the apartments because it's the church's apartments. But there would be if we subdivided the parcel. So just keeping those little details in mind.
Thank you,
Any
Alice.
other questions?
You have a question for Alice? I wanted to actually ask Sheldon a question. This for the very first time was brought up, this whole hearing around the idea that churches could either partner with or keep the land, like the actual land conversation. Because I don't want it to be seen as that we're trying to encourage churches to give away their land or do. Can you talk about just like what the actual model could look like and how it becomes good for the church or not, to pick up on Alice's point?
Yeah, that's a great question. A simple real estate transaction is I own land, I sell it to you, and you develop on it. But there are different models where you could do a land lease. You could do a co-development where the church still owns a certain amount so that they'll get part of the operating dollars. So you could do some type of land trust where you hold on to the land and then someone develops the land on top. So there's a few different models for churches, and many churches are, to your point, interested in maintaining some type of control. So when you said earlier that it could be good to the choice, I think that adds some color to how the churches can benefit. It's really a win-win-win in my view for the church, for the community, and for the city larger needing the extra housing units.
Thank you. Please.
Am I on? Okay. I just wanted to speak to Ms. Fuller's comments about if you do have a property with an existing church on it, and on the 161 corridor, this was just brought into Zone In earlier this year. If you do have a church property in that situation, it's great news because multi-unit development is allowed outright. But if you have an existing building and you're not doing anything with that building, you don't need to redesign your building to comply with the code. It's only the new buildings that would need to meet the design standards of the code. And also, since there are no parking minimums in the new districts, if you were subdividing the church parcel from the multi-unit development area, you wouldn't need a variance for having parking on one parcel that was being used by the other parcel. So those are two barriers that would be removed right there for you. So yay. Yay, Zone In.
Thank you. Thank you.
Speaking about energy saving, very important. I just want you to know you are in a facility that is 100% solar powered.
So what he is saying for the folks on CTV is that this facility that we are in is a 100% solar powered facility. That's huge. We should give you a round of applause for how you put that together. Very good, very good. Thank you, Alice. Our next speaker to come before us is Nicole Harding. Ms. Nicole.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. I want to start by introducing Janet Daniels. Janet Daniels is so dear to me. She has been in, 21 years ago, she signed up for a 15-year home lease option program. Myself, 16 years ago, I went to First Church of God and signed up for a 15-year lease option program. And today, we both have not purchased our home. One of the reasons I wanted to be here today, because I am a woman of faith, and I am here representing many families, like Miss Janet, to ask you guys to help us. Because this is something that when you think about going into a program with the churches to help make affordable housing, one thing I don't want you guys to forget is the people that are in them houses and following through with the promises that you have given us. That's right. One of the things that has not happened in this program, they have not followed through with the things they have promised us. And this is huge for me. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to come here today, is to ask you guys, help us, guide us, and guide your fellow church members, churches that are coming into these programs to do the right things, and don't just after you develop these housing, don't forget the people that are in them. We are the people that are in them, and we are struggling and we are fighting to purchase our homes. We are the ones that are going to be displaced. We are going to be priced out in this market if we do not purchase our homes. Exactly. The biggest part for me was I grew up in a church, family, everybody, and I went to a church and signed up for this program. I've contacted that church. They have not reached back out to me. They have not helped us. So I figured I'd come here today to speak to you and ask for help. Again, this is Janet Daniels, and I'm Nicole Hardin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicole. Who's from my team is going to be point on this? Mario, you're going to be pointing, working with Ms. Harding to work through this. We definitely, you're right, and thank you for putting it focus. At the end of the day, we've been talking about units. This is about people and families. Amen. And so we know that no one's perfect, and no project is going to be perfect. But at the end of the day, we should protect and live up to what we say. Sure.
Guide them through everything, because a lot of us, we don't know homeownership.
Sure.
And to have that, I was a single mom when I did this.
Yeah.
I was on Section 8.
Yeah.
I started off, I make well over $100,000 now
Yeah.
a year, and I am well capable
To
of
buy
buying
it.
my home. But I want to stay in a community where I know all my neighbors.
Sure.
My neighbors have come together. We started having meetings on our own to purchase these homes. So I just ask for help, that's all. And just
Got it.
remember the people that are in them homes.
Thank you. Seriously, thank you for being here. Our last speaker to come before council is Mr. Adam Troy. I've been looking around. I do not see. Okay. He's an important component. I think he definitely has expertise in leading faith-based housing initiatives. So I definitely wanted to hear from my brother Adam Troy. Ms. Bassey, you want to come forward? Sure. Adam, we're going to jump you real quick. Legal aid and Ms. Patsy Thomas are going to come, and then my brother Adam Troy will be our final speaker before council.
All right. Hi, everyone.
council members, President Hardin, thanks for inviting us today. My name is Joe Shutsushima. I'm with Legal Aid of Southeast and Central Ohio. I manage the Tenant Advocacy Projects or Eviction Prevention Clinic over at Eviction Court downtown, where Patsy and I were this morning. Patsy and I have been having a lot of conversations with churches, reaching out to us, asking, what do we do? We recognize there's a crisis, and you guys are the ones down at court talking to the folks who are getting kicked out of their homes and trying to figure out where they need to go. And the one thing I would hope to emphasize most, speaking on our clients' behalves, is to really pay attention to restoring the humanity to the tenants that you're trying to provide housing for. At eviction court, the number of our clients who get yelled at by landlords and their attorneys just because they're trying to make the bottom line. It is very difficult for our clients to put into context that there's all this development going into the city of Columbus, and they're getting pushed out from their housing. They're having to relocate to further and further out the outer rings of the city of Columbus. They may have started downtown, now they're in Reynoldsburg, Whitehall, and further out the belt. And as an attorney, I can only tell them what their rights are as to what their rights are with their relationship with their landlord. And for churches that are looking at trying to help create these developments, these new housing options for tenants, please keep in mind that you also have a lot of power around what that relationship looks like moving forward with the tenants. You can do things really simple as considering, what do your hiring practices look like? What property management company are you using? What is their reputation like? Does the property management company itself have a license for managing properties itself? There's a lot of little details that can be looked into. And I think probably the greatest benefit that I see here is the collectiveness of this effort right now. There's so many folks in this room with so many different backgrounds. And honestly, I can't be the person to tell you what to do. You guys are the ones that are speaking to your communities. Your own congregation probably has the best insights as to what they're experiencing and what they're seeing in your own neighborhoods. Talk to them, share with each other. If you guys could actually just, I think there just needs to be a sort of a YIGB conference or something at this point in Columbus. If everybody can just get together and start sharing ideas and coordinating and figuring out what kind of things we can do collectively, that can make a tremendous impact. I'll pass it to my colleague. Oh, sorry.
I started laughing because HACO is hosting a YIGB conference in February? February. Yes, and first of next year, so we will make sure you're there.
Council President, others. There was a time when we could look out into the courtroom and we would see pastors sitting in the courtrooms because they had a member of their church there for whatever reason. And that doesn't happen anymore. I remember telling the judge in former life when I was a bailiff, pastor such and such is here in the courtroom. And they would call that pastor up after court was finished and speak with that pastor and talk to that pastor, get a relationship with them. That doesn't happen anymore. We have individuals in eviction court, they're all alone. Most of those individuals look like me with children. Single mothers with children. That's who the makeup of in eviction court. Those are the tenants that are being evicted. One thing I would like to suggest as we're going through this process, first of all, yes, we need more affordable housing. Yes, yes, yes. But we need to keep the tenants in affordable housing. Having tenants come to court and we look at the ledger, maybe it's for a non-payment of rent. We look at the ledger. Almost all of it is late fees. Late fees. What I would suggest at this point, while we're beginning to look at what is this going to look like, you're putting legislation together and so forth. I recall that when we give a company an abatement, they would have to have so many employees. I'm going to hire so many employees with this tax abatement. If the city gives me a tax abatement, I promise to hire so many employees over this much time. What about with our faith-based leaders. You're going to come together with this development. And once it's done, we promise to hire a licensed property manager that knows what they're doing, okay? Licensed property manager or trained property manager. Why is that important? Because we won't have individuals being brought to eviction court. We get everything straightened out, but oh, that eviction filing is still on their record. So that's a problem. We have to get it sealed, but it's already out. It's already on their record. So anything that happens before it's sealed, there's nothing we can do about it. So it's already out. If we get a trained property manager, all of the preliminary stuff can be taken care of, including, thank you, counsel, the pay to stay information. That maybe could have been taken care of before it even comes to eviction court. Number two, some property managers will use a standard lease, which is okay, but standard leases have on their information about per day late fees. So for whatever reason, we may have a tenant that, I don't know, maybe they had to take their car, the engine, something happened, and they're going to be a week late. They're going to get hit with a per day late fee. Now this is affordable housing. Now think about a per day late fee in addition to your rent. They're going to end up in eviction court, and they're not going to take any other rent until it's resolved. So every day they're going to be hit with a per day late fee and a flat fee. Affordable housing. We want to keep tenants in affordable housing. We're not saying their rent wasn't late, but there are some things we can do to stop the bleeding. So perhaps we can put in the legislation that once it's done, that you promise to hire somebody that knows what they're doing that's going to manage the property, licensed property manager, and there will be no per day late fees or something to that effect, because we want to keep the tenants in the housing. That's all I have to say about that. But thank you for the coming together as a Christ, as a God, I'm going to call it Yambi, but that's not it.
Yes, in God's backyard.
God's backyard. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's what you call advocacy. That's why she's one of our council members. We stand on her shoulders. We will say, as much as we talk about building affordable housing, this council believes in tenant protections. Saying that rents will go down after we build more housing, trust us, wait 10 years while people are being pushed out of housing right now makes no sense. To the council member's point, it's why we have passed tenant protections around one funding right to counsel, so that those single mothers, most of the folks that are at eviction court are women of color with children, and that they're not sitting down there by themselves, that they have folks like legal aid to support them, and other initiatives. So I just wanted to thank you for making sure that we don't forget the tenant protection component of affordable housing. The last speaker to come before council is my friend Adam Choi, Community for Caring Development Foundation. Welcome to council.
Thank you, President Hardin, Ed Dudley, Bill Dotson, Joe Ritchie, leader Johnny Pitts. This is a long way from where we started 20-something years ago, but I would dare say that it's probably part of what we envisioned that this space would be used for. I promise y'all what I'm pulling out is not a sermon. It will be very brief, but thank you for the opportunity. Council President Hardin, members of the Housing, Homelessness, and Building Committee and community partners, thank you for convening this important hearing and for your leadership in addressing one of our most urgent challenges facing Columbus, safe, affordable housing for all. I stand in support of advancing the Yes in God's Backyard initiative and related policy proposals that open the door for faith institutions to leverage their land as a tool for equitable development. Across our city, churches and faith-based organizations sit at the heart of neighborhoods. They are indeed trusted anchors, not just for worship, but also for food distribution, childcare, youth programs, health outreach, and countless other services that strengthen our community's well-being. Many of these institutions also steward land that can and should be repurposed to meet pressing housing needs. Unlocking the potential of faith-owned land is both practical and visionary. It is practical because faith communities already own and maintain these properties, often in areas where land costs and barriers to develop are otherwise prohibitive. It is visionary because it aligns with our values of dignity, justice, and opportunity, making sure that families of all incomes can live and thrive in every neighborhood. In Linden specifically, and certainly throughout Columbus, I have seen firsthand how faith-based partners can serve as conveners, collaborators, and catalysts for holistic change. Policies that lower barriers, provide technical assistance, and encourage innovative partnerships will allow congregations to reimagine their underutilized spaces as homes, hubs, and hope for future generations. This is not simply about building units of housing. It is about building stronger, more connected communities. Yes, in God's Backyard reflects a moral imperative to ensure that land stewarded for the public good continues to serve the public good, especially when it is sheltering and strengthening our neighborhoods and our families. I urge Council to continue advancing this conversation into concrete policy action. Together, we can ensure Columbus leads the way, ensuring how faith and city partnerships can transform vacant lots and underutilized property into pathways of stability, equity, and belonging. Thank you for your time and for your commitment to this vital work.
Thank you so much, Mr. Troy. One thing, I think you would be expertly to speak on just the role of CDCs and community, and maybe the built-in community trust that a CDC brings to a development, just because the work that your CDC has done over the years.
Happy to do so. Part and parcel, and forgive me for why I was delayed, is because we have a little summit going on with faith institutions that are in the city about that very same thing. I see Reverend Edgar in the audience, and man, 30 years ago, you and I believe, were the only faith-based entities over at Nationwide Children's Hospital talking about the value proposition of faith-based CDCs. CDCs, think of them as simply another car in the garage. In the secular side, we call it a community development corporation. Inside the walls of the church, we simply, as we often do, like to flip pronouns, and we call it a church development corporation. But from an IRS perspective, it means the same thing. CDCs essentially allow the church to carry out their business by recognizing or working around the whole idea of separation of church and state. And so programming still gets done along what we like to call the horizontal line, which is access to housing, access to health care, dealing with food scarcity and education. CDCs structurally are set up as separate entities. Some of them still are structured like we are, and I believe a few others, where the church still maintains sole legal ownership of the CDC. You do that in case you wind up in a situation where the tail ends up wagging the dog. The CDC's activities and budgets can quickly outpace the budget of the average church. And if you don't have the right leadership sitting in the seat, the CDC starts to think it's a little bit bigger than the church, and you got a situation where the tail is wagging the dog. In that instance, any of our members, quite frankly, that live here, that don't understand all the sophistication about CDCs based upon most of our constitutions, can call a church meeting and vote to shut the CDC down. That is the safeguard. You could be one of the Cadillac versions, as we like to refer to as Day Springs, where they're big enough to have their own separate entity. They don't necessarily have to report to the church, but they do that, right? The CDC simply gives you a vehicle. It is one of the smartest vehicles that I would encourage all faith-based institutions to look into. Columbus is now, by virtue of some of the work that we're doing, there are 5 pastors who are in here now from larger cities who are having conversations about using our models to do much bigger deals. So I would encourage everybody to simply look at that structure, Councilman, and the rest of council. You have a separate board of trustees, you have separate fiduciary responsibility, and as you're looking at that, finally, there's 3 things you always want to look at. Ask yourselves, what are you afraid of? Ask yourselves, what's the legal exposure? And then ask yourselves, what's the financial exposure? I guarantee you 99.8% of the time, there's always that 2%, right? 8% of the time, that a CDC structure may be the sole vehicle that you can put in place to address all of that. So it is a vehicle that we certainly would encourage being looked at more and more to help advance what we're trying to get done by virtue of these conversations today.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
I just want to thank you all for joining us today for this hearing. We want to hear from you and stay in communication about what we are thinking about with this policy. My commitment is to bring something before council before the end of the year for passage specific to zoning. It is the rule that we are bringing forward is about process and moving the faith land process quicker. So you will be hearing more about the actual piece of legislation. We have a Columbus Forward website. As soon as the legislation is actually draft, we will publish it there and we'll push it out so you can actually read the legislation, give us feedback before passage before the end of the year. I want to thank all the team members who helped put this hearing together today. Mario Duvall, Suzanne Chow, Dr. Katie Fallon, Shannon Pine, and Tony Calabrese from BZS. To our invited speakers, and certainly for Corbin Commons and Pastor Pitts for opening their doors. And certainly want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Deakar, for her leadership and support and for making these policies better. With that, if there are no further comments, we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.